To call the meeting of the Community Justice Collaborating Council to order. I believe all voting members are at the table. If not, if you'll please join us. And we do have a quorum. First, as I said, welcome. It's been a while since we met. As the minutes that were included in the packet indicate, May was our last formal meeting of the council. As you also know, July was skipped because we had said goodbye to Mike O'Keefe, our longtime and CJCC director, and had just recently welcomed Susan Caparelli, who not only wears his hat, but she'll describe to you is also now wearing a few other hats. And so, in fairness to her, we made an executive decision to not have the July meeting, but rather to push our next gathering out to today. So I thank all of you for your attendance today. Let's call the roll. And Jody, do you want to do that? I'll do it. Okay, Dave Peterson.
Here.
Dave Osnes. Scott Knudsen.
Present.
Scott Cox. Here. Christy Severson. Here. Kate Avalos. Here. Mark Lemke. Here. Kurt Thomason. Allison Page. Randy Morissette.
Here.
We have Gordy Young, the chief from River Falls, appearing in place of Mark Richard. Ken Witt.
Present.
Bob Fiedler.
Here.
Agnes Ring. Sue Garrity. Bob Rarrett.
Here.
Travis Sartorius. And Carl Anderson. As indicated, we have a quorum. The minutes from that May 13 meeting were included in your materials. I fully appreciate it 6 months ago, but are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
By Mr. Lemke, second by Ms. Avalos. Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Carried. Public comment, and I know Yvonne Larson asked me before the meeting if she could make a 1.2 minute, I think she said, public comment, so I won't hold her to that, but Ms. Larson.
Thank you.
If you want to come up to the microphone at the podium, please. This little button so it turns red.
All right, is that all right? Well, I want to make you aware of an event next week at the New Richmond Service Center. The event is Shop with a Cop. A detective from the sheriff's office 5 years ago, as I understand the story, would go into homes and make arrests, and often there would be children there, scared, crying, some with old clothes, old shoes. And so that detective took the initiative to partner with Grace Place, raise funds, and that year they provided new clothes and shoes for 46 children throughout St. Croix County. Next week, we have that same program, and we are providing shoes and clothes for over 100 qualified students throughout the entire county, including some of those that reside at the Grace Place Homeless Shelter. Officers from the Sheriff's Department, along with officers from all 10 of the county police departments, will gather together at that facility, and one by one, they will take those students over to Walmart to do shopping. The kids have games, hot dogs, bounce house. We make it a fun event, and also with the hope of forming a new positive relation with law enforcement people. It's a great event, and I just wanted to make you aware of that. You're going to be hearing from Roy Schoberg about Casa. I'm hoping to be the first advocate for that program. I've been attending meetings here for over 2 years, specifically to learn about Casa. And then also, I just want to mention that just the opportunity for me to be here and just hear the great things that you do in this county. I'm just so grateful to be part of a county that values youth, especially at-risk youth, and I'm so thankful that I can be part of those programs. So, 1.2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if we looked up the definition of community in the dictionary, you'd probably see a picture of Yvonne Larson. Her energy and interest in all things kids, all things community continues to impress not only me, but I know all my colleagues on the bench and anyone else who has the benefit of working with her on any project that she finds of interest. Other public comment, and unfortunately I didn't alert Supervisor Fiedler, but I know there was a elder abuse conference that the supervisor organized and facilitated. I believe it was 2 days ago. Do you just want to share, Supervisor, how that went?
Oh, absolutely, Judge. Thank you. Well, several people here made the program a success. The sheriff gave a very nice presentation. Your colleague, Judge Black, had an excellent introductory presentation and got everything started. The program was co-sponsored by our district attorney, and he wrapped up the program. Oh, let's see, we had, Bob Rohrt had several of his staff present. We had the faith community represented by the pastor from United Methodist Church. And who am I forgetting? I know that we had, we had ADRC folks present, and we had the financial community of St. Croix County represented in the form of representatives from Edmund Jones and the First National Community Bank in New Richmond. They really discussed the various aspects of elder abuse, what the county can do to support people that are victims of it. This is the year declared by the United Nations of access to justice regarding elder abuse, and so we wanted to have that theme of justice in it. And hopefully it'll be aired several times on the Rivertowns channel, and people in the senior centers and others in the county can view it. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Supervisor, for organizing that with the district attorney. And again, those are the things, again, that make this county stand alone in terms of opportunities and public input. Any other public comment? Mr. Sartorius, join us at the table. We'll find a chair. No, you're a voting member. Come on, come forward. The agenda was provided to you. I'm making one modest change. Professor Phil Golly is here from the University of River Falls and has been doing a lot of work in terms of our treatment court and statistical analysis. He has another commitment. He's on his way from here up to Brainerd for a presentation, and so I indicated I would move him to second on the agenda, so if you'll just note that change in the agenda. I already somewhat introduced, but as you know, when we last met, we were in the final phases of finalizing a plan to incorporate our CJCC into a new department of the county, Justice Services or Justice Support Services. I can't remember exactly what I reported out in May, but we had received approval from County Administrator Witt and from the county board to proceed with that particular initiative, which this group had helped formulate and support. And it really was trying to pull together a number of different silos, as I described them, into one department that would support various justice initiatives in the county. And with, again, the support of the county administrator, the county board, we interviewed and hired Susan Caparelli as our new Justice Services Director, who also wears the hat of CJCC coordinator. And I'll let her introduce herself because I could not do justice to her resume or to her background. So, Ms. Caparelli, tell us about yourself and what's happening.
Well, I feel like I've been here for 7 years working with everybody, so I kind of feel like I'm back with family and friends and my own community members. So for me, it was an easy transition as far as that's concerned. I started June 21st in earnest, and it's been kind of a whirlwind tour, but It's been exciting and fun. Certainly the CJCC is a passion of mine. I love people coming together and doing good work. I'm a very action-based doer, so I look forward to working with the subcommittees and actually, progressing work forward. I know that that's Judge Needham's desire as well. My department has been ever evolving and changing. Certainly the CJCC is under my umbrella, but also the treatment courts, and of late, more of the pretrial services and the transition from, and I'll let Sheriff do his own presentation on what that is all about, but the DRC and how we're working with pretrial folks and how the DRC is evolving into a civilian-run operation. And we're kind of looking toward, and you'll probably hear about this in the future, changing the name up a little bit, Justice Support Services. It's kind of sticking with us a little bit, but those are some things that we've been working on. I look forward to meeting with all of you. My door is always open, and I very much am a come in and talk with me person. So please, feel free. I look forward to it. So.
Thank you. And Susan, as you'll recall, had joined us at many of our meetings over the years when she was the Director of Restorative Services out of River Falls, and so she's no stranger to this group, but certainly in her new role, she brings with her all those talents as well as aptitudes in directing this new department, which, as she said, has been evolving. I think is a good word to use, and one, again, that will provide, I know, a significant benefit to the county. The next item, as I said, we're going to move Professor Ghali's presentation up. By way of introduction, he is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-River Falls and has been working with Kim Kitzberger and Judge Waterman, now Judge Nordstrand, and other stakeholders in our treatment courts to do some of the, what I'll characterize, I think, as statistical analysis and other process analysis for that program. So, Professor Ghali, introduce yourself and what would you like to share? Or Judge Waterman, what would you like to share?
Yeah, we're going to tag team this. I wanted to just make a couple of preliminary comments and then turn it over to the professor. Treatment court is what's called an evidence-based program. And I know evidence-based decision-making, evidence-based programs is a term that gets thrown around a lot, but what it really means at its core is that it's been proven effective. You follow the model, you're going to get a particular result. Now, in treatment court, over the past 15, 16 years, we've been collecting a lot of data. Various data points about who our participants are, what types of substances they use, whether they're male, whether they're female, young, old, how many times we give them acclimation, how many times we give them sanctions or punishments. And we can analyze this data and make some general conclusions about whether our program is effective or ineffective. But we, of course, are not, when I say we, I'm talking about the treatment court, are not data analysts. And that's where Professor Ghali comes in. We hired Professor Ghali and some of his research students to conduct an analysis of the treatment court program to find out whether or not it's doing what it's supposed to do, follow the model, and whether or not it's effective. Effective at the things that treatment courts are supposed to do: reduce crime, reduce recidivism, increase periods of sobriety, and reducing overall costs to the justice system, both in this building and out in the community with reduced crime. So we're very excited to hear some of the preliminary findings from Professor Ghali, and I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Susan, can I move through this slide presentation myself?
No idea.
With the arrows on the keyboard, you should be able to.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, yes. So I guess the best place to start, when we look at outcomes, in order to be able to determine that process, we first need to conduct what's called a process evaluation and look at exactly what we're doing so we can understand what to evaluate. And so that was kind of this first part, and that's the majority of what I'll be discussing today is this idea of a process evaluation. What is it exactly that the treatment court does? We all can guess, and there are policies certainly, but really on my end, talking with the treatment court staff and doing observations allows me to say, okay, these are the things that are currently being done. And then that next step is to say, here are the outcomes, right? And so we're working through that right now. We do have some preliminary results, which I'll share here in a little bit. And we will have more to come in the next couple months in terms of talking to past and current treatment court participants and getting some of their input to help supplement some of the things that we've found looking through the data and through our observation narrative. So if we look at kind of the history of treatment courts in this country, they've been around for over 30 years. They're very, very popular. Every state, every county, most municipalities across the United States have some sort of treatment court. And they are very effective. The research largely, and the literature shows that they do help people in a number of ways, whatever that outcome is, right? Whether that's reducing crime, whether that is reducing substance use, whatever measure that we're looking for, and those are all very important, very effective. So that's really important. Again, starting in the late 1980s, early 1990s, they expanded rapidly across the United States. And so these are not novel concepts, they're not new, but they all look a little bit different. Specialty courts across the country are also extremely popular. So it's not just treatment courts. It is diversion programs, programs for folks that have been previously in the military. So again, these ideas are things that really kind of hone in on addressing specific types of individuals who become justice involved. And the idea is that it's therapeutic in nature, and that you bring together a team of individuals to treat that person holistically, right? So it's not just the fact that this person has come in contact with the criminal justice system, traditionally speaking, right? Yes, that's important, but what other needs do they have? The judge mentioned evidence-based practices, which is a huge buzzword in the criminal justice system, right? Evidence-based this, evidence-based that. Well, what does that exactly mean, right? And what we do know is that there are certain factors that drive crime, right? Criminogenic factors. But there's that side of the coin, but there's also protective factors, right? What are some things that we can do to kind of insulate people? And that is what treatment courts do, right? They offer those services. So just a quick timeline here. If we go back 8 months, the treatment court had contacted me about conducting this evaluation, this process evaluation, and then the next part, the outcomes analysis. So that took place in January, starting in February and on into the summer into June. That was when we really started getting going and conducting interviews with treatment court team members, doing some observation on my end. That was my main responsibility. The students that I had help me were really kind of in the background. And for me, it was, again, coming to treatment court in both virtual as well as in-person sessions. There was a switch in judges in June, and so I wanted to make sure that I did, for lack of a better term, justice to that and observe both courtrooms. Looking at policy, right? So what does policy say that the treatment court in St. Croix County does? That's really important. That's important at all phases, but important this idea of fidelity, right? This is what we say we do, but what exactly are we accomplishing? That is incredibly important because it speaks certainly to effectiveness. And then some descriptive data that I'll present today is something we've been working on recently. And then in July and August, draft and final reports were submitted to Susan, looking at, again, what are some of these things that we found. So the treatment court team, some of you may know, is very large, right? It's very interdisciplinary. So we have treatment court judge, like I said, there's been a shift in the last 3 months. A representative from the district attorney's office, public defender's office, probation and parole. Again, Kim Kitzberger, who works as a treatment court coordinator. So again, it's not just your traditional court setting where you have a judge and prosecutor and defense attorney, right? That what they call the courtroom work group, right? This brings in others. And this is kind of just the formal list of individuals that provide those services. I'm going to talk a little bit about services that are offered. That's a really unique aspect to treatment courts. It's not just that we're going to deal with this legal aspect. It's going to, again, look at what are the needs that this person has, right? Because again, like I had said previously, we know that those needs drive criminal behavior. So is it substance use? And in the case of treatment court, there's that implication of substance use, right? Is that drugs? Is that alcohol? Is that both? Is it maybe that somebody has an underlying mental health condition? But there are other needs that are services that are brokered along the process as well. And so again, that holistic process is really important. So again, just kind of a snapshot of what the treatment court has looked like here in St. Croix County. So has operated for about 15 years. The last formal evaluation was done about a decade ago, and that's great. Routinely, treatment courts across the country engage in these process evaluations and outcomes analysis every 5 to 10 years. Policy may change, and with that, so too should looking at the analysis. What is it that we say that we're doing up against what exactly are we accomplishing? Another kind of important point here is the idea that when you have staff turnover, people come in and policy may remain the same, but people may do things a bit different, so making sure that we understand that. We looked at both tracks, track 1 and track 2. So again, for folks that are familiar with the treatment court, track 1 is looking at folks who have some sort of underlying, or maybe even not underlying, but a substance use challenge in their life, right, as assessed through risk and need. And these 3 assessments right here, the COMPASS, the IDA, and the ASAM, are ways that we can assess someone's risk. And then again, when we look at this idea of risk, as evidence-based practices go, it's kind of in 3 different parts. So there's someone is given an assessment and they're told what the risk is. Are they high risk? Are they medium risk? Are they low risk, right? And that's really very surface level. Going beyond that, it's then looking at this idea of need. So what is driving the risk? What are those needs? Again, is it substance use? Is it mental health? Is it lack of employment, lack of education? And then the final part is the most important. It's called responsivity. So risk, need, responsivity, R&R. You can have the first 2 and you can identify those, and that's fine, but what are we doing about it, right? And that's what treatment court offers, is the response. So again, that's the key point, but the response has to be appropriate. It has to be not necessarily just evidence-based and data-driven, but again, is it effective, right? Resources can only go so far, so making sure we're using the resources that we have to select the appropriate responses based on what people need is kind of that train of thought there. So if we look at folks that become, that would like to participate in the treatment court, some of the criteria, both inclusion as well as exclusion. So being an adult, adjudicated as an adult over age 17, resident of St. Croix County, that's pending substance use charge or substance use is implicated, no pending charges, and not defined as a violent offender. These are very standard as far as treatment courts go across the country, so not really much to comment on here. So this is where we start to really get into what are we seeing with the treatment court. Where it starts, and I won't say stops, but where it starts is with judicial oversight. I believe, and literature shows, that that is really one of the biggest aspects of treatment courts, is the role of the judge and the methods that they use to help folks kind of navigate that process. Again, in more of your traditional judicial settings, again, looking at research in my background in probation and parole, a judge interacts with somebody very rarely, right, during different hearings, and they process people through rather quickly. It's that efficiency part of the judicial system which is really important. This is quite different, right? So the judge plays a very active role in this, what we would call therapeutic community, meeting with people weekly during status hearings or every so often, being part of staffing hearings. So that judicial oversight, again, is really kind of the key component to what is being offered in treatment courts. Community supervision. So we do know through, again, research that when we talk about consequences for somebody that's become justice involved, that rehabilitation component is really important, but there has to be a little bit of bite to the bark. We can't just completely get away from what we would call consequences or punishment, right? And so when somebody becomes justice involved, yes, we want to help them address their underlying issues through treatment court, but maybe it is that probation and parole needs to be involved and hold people accountable. Accountability, we don't ever lose sight of that, or we shouldn't. It's that combination of both which is really important. So community supervision, again, yes, we see this in a traditional setting where somebody is placed on probation, but these individuals working together and having those open lines of communication, really important. So case management is, again, I think something that everybody thinks a lot about with these types of specialty courts. Brokering services is another way of maybe looking at it. So again, we have these team of individuals that we just had up there that can help out people in a number of different ways. But what about if they need a referral for childcare, or they need a job referral, right? That's another huge component that you don't see in your traditional courts. And so, again, something that the treatment court can really offer. And then counseling, right? So, again, part of the reason why folks end up justice involved may be substance use, drugs, and or alcohol. And part of the reason why they're accepted into the treatment court program is because of that. So in order to address that, counseling services are really necessary. So again, being able to broker those services, we maybe another way of looking at treatment in specialty courts are like a one-stop shop. If anybody's ever heard that cliche before, it's really true, right? It's somewhere where you can go, and the folks that are there may not be able to offer it, but they're going to be able to broker those services for you. So again, counseling is another key component to all of this. So again, I had two opportunities, once in the spring virtually, and then once earlier in the summer to observe the treatment court. And I had informally observed it pre-pandemic on my own accord based on some other research that I was doing. But this was a chance for me to sit down and actually take this in, objectively and look at what's going on. On both occasions, I sat in on the staffing. So staffings take place on Wednesday mornings at 7:30 prior to the status hearings. And again, once virtually and then another time in person. The one thing that I really noticed about the staffings is how comprehensive they are, extremely thorough. And that's in my report, which I had provided to Susan, and that is publicly available, and I'd be happy to provide anyone with that. The staffings are, like I said, very, very thorough, to where, and again, part of my recommendation, at least at this stage, is maybe some of what is done in the staffings could be done either informally through maybe email, or could be discussed in the status hearings. Staffings, it's possible that they could, the time spent on them could be reduced a little bit, but again, they are very well run. The status hearings, again, after staffings, the status hearings take place. It's again, this therapeutic environment. The one thing that I observed was in both instances, judges, their demeanor, informal in nature, but that doesn't take away from the role that they provide is, again, what's talked about is like a case manager of the courtroom. So talking with people, asking for updates on their sobriety, which is acknowledged with every single individual. Towards the end, how many days of sobriety do you have? An acknowledgement of that. So again, a key component to treatment court. Talking about people's family lives, their social support, how their employment's going. So again, the focus of treatment court, yes, is judicial in nature. Yes, there is that court component, but it's, again, treating the whole person, right, involving different aspects. And then after that, I was able to, again, observe a couple different screenings for prospective participants. And again, the one thing that I noticed was everyone who's involved in the staffing is involved in the status hearing, is involved in the screening. So there's a lot of continuity there, which is incredibly important. It's not choppy where somebody is leaving and coming in or jumping on and off the call. That continuity is incredibly important for the people that are participating and the folks that are prospective participants. Because the prospective participants, if they're observing, not necessarily the staffings, but the status hearings, they're again seeing that the same folks that were present in court for a period of time are now interviewing them, right, for inclusion. And so they see that everyone is involved in that process. It's not just the judge or just the prosecutor or just the defense attorney or even the treatment court coordinator, right? It's everybody that's involved. So that's very important. So just, again, some very preliminary results. Was able to pull some of these things from core programming that the state of Wisconsin runs. And there's some kind of, I won't say incomplete data because that's not necessarily the case, but these are just kind of some snapshots, and I'll talk a little bit more about these. So one of the big things, and one of the things that I really wanted to lead, and you'll notice this in the report, there are some great things that are going on, and then maybe some challenges that the treatment court can work towards bettering themselves. Again, part of the idea of having an independent outcome process evaluation is to look at what are some things that we can do better as we move forward for grant applications and just for serving our clientele better. But one of the really important things was the success rate. Folks that are graduating, over half. And, you know, that may seem not ideal, right? And certainly that number could be higher. But if we look at the national averages, St. Croix County's treatment court is 10% higher. 47% nationally, on the national level, 57% in St. Croix County. So that is, I think, a really nice thing to push forward and ask ourselves, and I think some of the things that I hope to draw out in this next part is to ask folks, what is it about the treatment court that helped you be successful, right? So we can take that 57% and push forward. Yes?
Question.
Please.
I'm just wondering, you're including data there for a 4-year period of time. Have you seen any progression in like increased percentage of completion over time, or has it been kind of steady?
It seems to be fairly steady, but that's something we can look further at. Yeah, that's a good question, because that's really important to understand. Has that increased? Has it decreased? Yeah, good question. Please.
I appreciate the demographics. This is very interesting. Do you have age breakdown?
We do, yeah. And I don't have that here, but I can provide that, yeah. Yep, we do have that. And the ages are in ranges, and I'm just trying to think back. I think there's an age range of, well, I don't want to say something that's not accurate, but I've got a picture in my head of what this looks like, so yeah, I can provide that. Other questions? So as far as participation goes, more males participating in the program. Again, something I found really interesting. It's not necessarily contradictory to what I've seen otherwise, and probably doesn't surprise a lot of people in the room, but, you know, overwhelming majority of individuals, their drug of choice is self-identified as methamphetamine. So again, I think that's something that should be of particular interest to the folks. And then really for me, points 1 and 4, selfishly put those up there because it shows a lot, not that 2 and 3 aren't important, but point number 4 tells us a lot of what we want to know when we're evaluating programs based on risk. Unfortunately, sometimes programs bring people in based on their risk level. And what I mean by that is oftentimes you see a majority of people identified as low risk. And that's not the case here. So folks that are identified as high risk are being brought into the program, which is a great thing. These are the individuals that need the services that are being offered by the treatment court and by St. Croix County. So again, I think that's really important, that it talks to the point of the appropriate people are being entered into the program, are being screened effectively, and are being brought in. again, I think sometimes there's this idea that if we bring lower risk individuals in, that they're going to be easier to work with. That may be true, but again, how effective is that? We're not seeing that here, right? So the Compass risk assessment is, again, saying that there's a majority, or excuse me, the majority of folks are high risk. Again, some other really positive aspects, objectively speaking, you know, a lot of collaboration between the team members that I observed. And again, I think I spoke to that earlier about communication and continuity. There seemed to be clear lines of communication. The staffings, the status hearings, the interviews were seamless, transitioning between one another, even within the status hearings, the folks that were, you know, the participants that were coming up, it all seemed to move very seamlessly. So I think that's a positive. Again, that 10% greater graduation rate is really important. I think the next idea is to flesh that out and say, why is that? What are the 5 reasons that people identify as why they've been successful, and continuing to run with that, expand on that, while at the same time identifying maybe some of the shortcomings, and we can also increase that number. You know, another really important point that I was able to pull from CORE, the amount of time that is averted based on jail as well as prison. So CORE identifies that the drug court participants in that period of time that I put up there from October of 16 to April of 20 averted 1 year of jail time and 5 years of prison time. There are a number of factors that likely go into that based on what is the charge that somebody had and what penalty does that carry had they gone through a traditional court. But again, I think that really speaks to a number of things, in particular, resources. We know how expensive jail and particularly prisons are, right? So again, and that's just one way of looking at it. So we're avoiding that by keeping these folks in the community and working through some of these challenges. So again, I think that's a really important point as we move forward, that the county and the treatment court continue to look at, is how do we continue to increase those numbers? Certainly some challenges, as any assessment would find. There are no perfect programs out there. One of the big ones is maybe more complete data. CORE seemed to be missing some things, and I won't say chunks of time, that's not necessarily the case, but there are some missing data points there. Data could be entered a little bit quicker, and so we can have a more complete picture. Because what I provided was a snapshot based on what I had available to me. So more complete data, I think, is really important. The treatment court is operating and moving people along efficiently, but that could be done better. So literature research says folks should be in and out of a treatment court in 12 months. We're seeing about 16 months on average time in the program. So it's about a 25% higher than it should be. So 4 months may not seem like a lot, and certainly folks have challenges, they relapse. That's all very understandable, but that number could be worked to be closer to a year in an ideal world, right? So I think working towards that. I had talked about reducing time and staffings. I think that that's something that could be streamlined a little bit. What that actually looks like, I think I can help to maybe flesh that out a little bit more, because I know I'm making these recommendations, and folks may be sitting here and saying, well, that's great, but how do we do that, right? How do we streamline this process? Which is a very fair question. A challenge, I put it here as a challenge, but it's a positive, is incentives. So folks that are part of the treatment program are incentivized to continue to participate. They are acknowledged of their sobriety, the successes that they made. The judges acknowledge those, write their name down on a card, and at some point they can cash in those cards, which, you know, have some sort of value to them for later prizes or incentives. A big thing that we see in research is that people really love certificates, and so at certain milestones, and I know that this may sound kind of silly, but at certain milestones, as people meet certain thresholds, that may be one thing that the treatment court could continue to do to incentivize people. Hey, you've met 30 days sobriety. You have accomplished this. You've been at your job for 2 months, whatever it may be. That helps to encourage people to continue. And it doesn't have to be a certificate. There are other things. The nice thing about certificates is they're on the cheaper end to do. It's not something that costs a ton of resources. But the point is acknowledgement goes a really long way. The treatment court does a great job of that, but I think they can continue to do that through some other methods as well. So next steps. For the next couple of months, I had put in my report, I think a few areas that the county the treatment court can look at is helping to identify mentorship, continuing mentorship programs for folks that are in the treatment court, whether that's through self-help groups, sponsors, so on and so forth. But I think that's a big one. Kind of help to close the gap between this is what the treatment court says they do the treatment court model between what they do. Mentorship is I think a key part to that, identifying those mentorship programs that may exist here in the county or where someone can access them elsewhere. Part of the policy and procedural manual, when I was looking through it, talks about this idea of reducing criminal behavior change, right? Those are, again, very important things. What does that mean, though? Like really fleshing that out. How are we measuring criminal behavior, reducing crime? Is that return to treatment court? Is that rearrest? What exactly does that mean? And then how can we identify, or how can the treatment court identify that change behavior? How can we understand if somebody's changed their behavior? That means a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. So I think really distilling that down and teasing that out and saying, yes, these are the ways that we can measure these two items. And then as we move forward with the outcomes analysis here, understanding fidelity. So the treatment court says this is what is actually being accomplished. Where is that gap? If even there is a gap there. So again, that fidelity component is really what we're working to identify now. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Professor, were you asked to, or do you know, is the treatment court monitoring what I call recidivism? In other words, those at the 60% that have been identified as graduating successfully, whether they've re-entered either the criminal justice system, has that been measured, or is that something that can be done?
Yes, it can be. We haven't looked explicitly at it, but that is important. And I think the idea is to flesh out exactly what does recidivism mean. Again, do they come back into the treatment court? Are they rearrested? So I think, again, thinking about how do we exactly want to measure that?
Okay. Other questions of Professor Ghali? He kind of alluded to it, but before becoming an academic, he was a probation and parole officer, so he has that kind of boots on the ground experience of working with offenders before he joined the world of academia. Any questions of the professor? Supervisor Fiedler.
Just a quick question. You mentioned a 60% success rate. Was it greater in track 1 or track 2?
Track 1. Yeah, track 1. The track 2 data is a little bit more incomplete, so there was a lot of the results that were inconclusive. Historically, we do see OVI drug court participants have a higher success rate, but I wasn't able to conclude from the data that was available.
Other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Professor.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Extremely.
Thank you.
And as the professor indicated, in June we had a change of leadership, so to speak, although I understand it's a collaborative model, but the court still, in many respects, I see as the leader of that particular effort. Judge Waterman, after 5 years, was relieved of his responsibilities to treatment court, so we thank him for that and his dedication to the program. And Judge Nordstrand willingly agreed with my nudging to take on that responsibility. So Judge Nordstrand has been treatment court judge since June. Judge Vlack, who's not here, really was the driving force behind getting treatment court up and running in St. Croix County, and that started, as we know, just shortly after its introduction, so if he were here, I would thank him as well. So any other questions on treatment court?
Just a
Yes.
comment. It's kind of interesting that the vast majority of the cases are meth. I mean, is that reflective of, proportionate to the utilization of meth in the region? Would we assume? It is. Meth is number one.
And it's certainly proportionate to what we see in criminal court in terms of the drug of choice that either through possession, through distribution, through a contributing factor for a burglary or something else, that is the driving drug in St. Croix County.
Interesting.
I'll just,
Mr. Anderson.
really quickly, I found this interesting from the National Drug Court Conference. Apparently meth is becoming a drug of choice all over the country. Even in the major cities, it used to be more of a rural thing, but apparently it's coming in as such high quantities. It's becoming cheaper, so that's actually a national trend. It's not really just the rural communities like it used to be when it was made in 2 liters. Now it's coming from Mexico and China.
And I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but I started as a judge in '94, which was really when meth started to enter St. Croix County. And I can recall talking to my colleagues in Milwaukee and Dane County and Green Bay, they'd never heard of meth. Meth was not part of their vocabulary. So St. Croix County really became kind of the pivot point for meth. And as the district attorney indicated, back in the day, our biggest concern was local manufacture, where folks would go into their local Walmart or Target, buy as much Sudafed as they could, find a farm field that was next to an anhydrous ammonia tank, do whatever you have to do to combine those ingredients, and we're cooking it there, cooking it in their homes, cooking it in their cars. St. Croix, as you know, led the charge in many respects in limiting how much Sudafed now you can buy in the drugstore, where you have to show an ID and other forms of identification. So we tried to eliminate one of the primary sources, but like any enterprise, it went underground. And so it's no longer being manufactured locally, it's now being manufactured commercially. And I think the potency, the quality is so much greater than what, similar to THC, than what it was when it was kind of a local product. But as the DA also said, meth has now found its way nationwide. Judge Nordstrand.
I, along with Carl, attended the National Association of Treatment Courts, or Drug Courts Conference, and one of the things that was scariest that I heard about meth was that, in fact, the locally produced meth of old is qualitatively different than what's being used now that's coming across the border from Mexico in vast quantities. In fact, it's being manufactured courtesy big cargo ships from China that are coming to Mexico, and an industrialization of meth production, essentially. But the experts there were saying that where it might have taken months for someone using meth to become significantly addicted in the old style meth, it takes weeks now with the new type of meth. And so the change in the brain and all of the things that go with it and all of the needs that develop as a result of that process happen much more quickly. And we are the recipient of that new kind of meth from Mexico. So it's a scary business.
Thank you. Next item is the Justice Service and Treatment and Alternative Diversion Grant Financial Review. Ms. Caparelli, you're going to take us through that?
Yeah, I'll just try to find it here. Well, this is a... So there's not much to report. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, if I can find it. So just so to be clear, I don't have a boon of finances. Justice Services is now a conglomeration of CJCC and treatment courts. So those financials are coming all under one umbrella now. So I did want to be clear on that. Number two, I did submit to the TAD folks, Department of Justice, for a little bit more than $40,000, and we did get that reimbursement at the end of August. So we're on track.
Thank you. Any questions about the financial report? Treatment and Alternative Diversion Grant 2022-27, work group update, Judge Waterman.
Thank you. The task force met last month. The task force consists of Kim Kitzberger, Lisa Moltoff, investigator Brandy Hart from the Sheriff's Department, Susan Caparelli, Carl Anderson, Ken Witt, and I believe Travis Sartorius. Are you on that? Yes. Well, we met last month to get back up to speed on the TAD grant application. And we have basically came up with some recommendations. One is to prioritize our existing programs. We want to make sure that what we're doing now is funded. And second, we're looking at asking for some additional money to fund someone to provide more help with the core data input. Core is a data system that the Department of Justice requires all TAD grant recipients to comply with. And it's essentially data entry, but it's on a very complicated, time-intensive level. And that's one thing that is required of all grant recipients. It measures how grant dollars are being used, and ultimately, the state hopes to have a database from which it can conclude whether or not TAD dollars are actually doing what they were intended to do. So we think some additional help there is warranted. We have debated in this meeting and previously whether or not we should swing for the fences and ask for something completely different, ask for a lot more money to fund new initiatives, especially in justice services. But we're also mindful of the fact that we have a competitive grant process this year. They run on 5-year competitive cycles, and this is a competitive open year. We are anticipating that there will be more counties applying for funds, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 counties. So very few counties will not be applying, and the pot of money is the same. So we have a significant increase in applicants applying for the same number of dollars. So we thought from a strategy standpoint, to prioritize our existing programs, we better focus on those programs rather than reinventing the grant application for something new. But we also want to get some help to our frontline workers so that we can comply with the core data requirements. And I believe Susan, Lisa, and Kim meet weekly to sharpen the application. I don't believe the grant has been released yet, so we don't, it has. When is it due?
Next week.
Oh, that was the other thing we were afraid of.
Yeah, we've been working on it. So Lisa and Kim have been busy.
Yes, okay. So we were afraid that there was going to be a quick announcement with a quick turnaround, and sure enough, those thoughts have been prescient, and here we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, anything you want to add as part of the work group that I think more front line?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. So it's $146,517 is what we receive from TAD currently. That covers, at this point, the compass assessor, benefits for that position, the case management specialist for the diversion program, travel and training in regards to both programs for our state and national conferences, supplies and operating expenses for the diversion program, and it also paid for MRT workbooks. There's been a steady incline with diversion program participants. Currently, the program is 292 individuals total in the program. About 60 of those are TAD cases. So we felt that, I believe that everyone felt that MRT would be better served at Health and Human Services. So we have shifted that program over to them, and Shar might be able to talk a little bit more about that. The primary 4 goals that we have right now for TAD, the 2 that are in the application are to reduce recidivism rates for nonviolent offenders in the program and increase public safety, reduce prison and jail populations by diverting nonviolent offenders to community-based interventions, improve the criminal justice system by continued collaboration with all stakeholders, and to improve behavioral health of individuals in the programs. So with the application, like Judge Waterman had indicated, it is due next Thursday, September 23rd. There's 54 counties currently funded. As Judge Waterman said, there'll probably be about 60 to 70 counties that will apply. There's $7 million available, and in 2023, they will have an additional 2.5 million available. So when we are looking at what we're able to obtain this year, we may be able to look at 2023 and see what we can additionally add that would be appropriate. But as Judge Waterman said, the help with the core data, I think, is primary. It is a very extensive data entry system that wants lots of information, which is wonderful because then we can get those reports and have all that information in one place. But it takes a very long time when you have a treatment court individual who is testing, 5 times a week, and then you're entering each one of those tests in. There's been times where Kim has spent, a huge amount of time entering 400 tests for one person. Diversion, we are also testing, but not on that level, but we also have other information that we have to put into those systems as well. So it's crucial to have that information and the help for getting that into the correct system.
And as Lisa and Judge indicated, the grant really is kind of like the dog chasing its tail because they require all this data and you have to pay somebody to do it. And so we're using grant dollars to hire someone to input the data to meet the qualifications for the grant. So the $146,000 isn't all going arguably for programming, it's going for data entry, which they require as part of their grant process. So it's, again, somewhat self-serving. Any other questions on the grant? Moving on, we have Sheriff Knudsen here, and I think, again, as Susan at least suggested, there have been some changes and ongoing developments in the Sheriff's Department, so we thought it a good time for Sheriff Knudsen to give us an update on what's happening in his department. Sheriff.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, we've kind of had a shift in, kind of a forced shift in how we are monitoring and handling, for me, Huber inmates because of staffing and changeover in DRC from a law enforcement run to a civilian run area. It changes some of the oversight in the monitoring. I'll speak on the Huber component of it. And Huber, for those that don't know, that's a work release program through the courts for those that have been sentenced. And part of their sentencing is the ability to have the opportunity to go out and work, child care, care for others in a medical situation on a limited basis. Because of, again, our lower numbers in staffing, we have followed a model utilized by a number of other counties, and that is our Huber population. They are on electronic home monitoring. So they're released from the jail, not fully released from the custody of the sheriff, but they are allowed to serve their sentence at home or in some other area and monitored by GPS ankle bracelet. We utilize a monitoring company that also is used by Pierce County, Rusk, Barron, Eau Claire, Dunn may also use it. So there's a number of other counties that utilize this form of monitoring. And what happens is the inmate that is serving, they get an ankle bracelet, and some of the violations, depending upon what they are serving for. If it's an alcohol-related offense, there may be more than the ankle bracelet. They may have to have one of the restrictions is to blow into the phone. There's an app that does that, or they give them an actual device. So they can do alcohol monitoring at certain times of the week, random times of the week. There's the component of monitoring those that have a violation or a conviction alcohol-related. For those that may not have the alcohol conviction and they're serving for a theft, for a domestic battery, something else that they're serving for, they could just potentially solely have the ankle bracelet. And those on alcohol may also still have that ankle bracelet. So they may have two forms of monitoring. Those that may not have the alcohol, they have the one form. So what the company does is they monitor movement. They have exclusion and inclusion zones, which means that there are areas for the exclusion that they can't be. Those that may have an alcohol violation, their exclusion zone may include bars, liquor stores, other areas that they shouldn't be going into. If it's a domestic situation that they're convicted of, they may have a no contact with a residence, a workplace, if that is where their victim or where maybe an ex-spouse may be at. So they set up those exclusion areas. Inclusion zones, they really just talk about when they're at home, that's where they're at. That's where they need to stay. And some of this new technology, they put it down to where if you leave your house and go out and mow your grass, there'll be an alarm. So they really have to be in contact with this monitoring company. If there's a violation, there are several types of violations. As I mentioned, the inclusion or exclusion. There's a battery, and then there's a strap alarm. So back to that inclusion, exclusion, if they go outside their house to mow their grass and they're still on the monitoring, but they're on their property, they'll probably get a phone call from the monitoring company saying, you're outside your area. You're not allowed to go do that. You're not allowed to run to the store. You're not allowed to go out and visit with the neighbor in his garage. You need to get back. If there's non-compliance or if they can't get a hold of them, what happens is they contact our dispatch center. Give all the information, location, person's demographics, and we'll send a deputy out to check on them. If that's a violation, they could be taken back into custody. And each one of these violations could result in an arrest at that time. And for the Huber violation, not an arrest in a new charge, but I'd pull them back in as they're similar to they're not following the jail rules if they were in the jail. So the inclusion, that's a time frame, they'll work that out, try and get a hold of the person. If it's an exclusion zone, such as somewhere they're not supposed to be, an alcohol violation or an alcohol location, maybe a domestic abuse, too close to the neighbor or too close to the victim, they won't try to contact them. They'll immediately call us. That's a zero time frame for that. They'll immediately call us. Dispatch will dispatch out, send out an officer in whatever jurisdiction that is, and we will attempt to remedy that situation. Battery, that also is one where they take a little more time. Hey, your battery's getting low. So it's not, hey, you've got a dead battery. It's, we see your battery is down to 10%. You know you need to charge this. Get it on the charger. So they try to work through that. Again, could result in us going out there. A strap alarm means that the strap is either tampered with or cut off. Again, that doesn't get a phone call to the person saying, hey, we see you cut your strap off, we're coming. That call comes directly to us. So that's kind of how right now we're monitoring Huber inmates. There's certain hookup days for them to get hooked up. They get sentenced, they come down, and certain days of the week is when sun monitoring shows up. Of course, they can't do it every day because they have their rotation around the region to set up in different counties. So they get set up, they sign the rules, not only with the monitoring company, but they also go through rules that are gone through and checked off by the deputy, so they understand what we are expecting as well as what the monitoring group is expecting. That's kind of a different shift in them coming back into work into the jail every day. The old Huber model was they'd get up in the morning, push the buzzer, they'd remain here in the jail, get their meal, they'd go out directly to work, directly back from work, check back in at the end of their day, and they'd stay within the facility. This is really just extending the facility to, quite frankly, their residents. Part of that is also there may be some restrictions on them staying in their residence. We need to ensure that if they're felons, they don't have any firearms in there. If there are alcohol issues, that they don't have any alcohol in there. No contacts. Some may have computer based upon a computer crime. Some restrictions there as well. So will this be the model that we utilize going forward? I don't know. I'm not saying I'm 100% comfortable with it either. It's a shift in the mindset that we've operated under for many years. When we get our staffing back and get our feet under us, I'd like to go back to the Huber model that I'm most comfortable with, and that's us actually seeing that person every day. Us seeing if there's a component of any other drug use or if they're attending their meetings, stuff like that. So I think there's a component to having physical face-to-face contact as opposed to not. And again, at any time, we could call them in for any other testing that we may deem appropriate based upon any information that we get from either a citizen or workplace or monitoring companies. So with Justice Point and with pretrial, during the day, I believe the monitoring, and I have to refer back more to Susan on what happens on the day-to-day. But we're looking at that model that pretrial, after hours, serious violations, that it would kind of follow that flow chart of dispatch gets notified, we go out and assess the situation, could result in, if there's violations, additional criminal charges along the lines of bail jump, or if there's a no contact, there could also be a new violation there as well. Again, that would be opposed to a Huber violation, which, if there's not a new crime, a violation doesn't automatically result in any new crime. It would just be a violation of the rules of the jail. So there's really two different models we're trying to maintain right now. So far, so good. No system is perfect, but we believe this is the best one that we have right now for the staffing that we have. And back to the basis of public safety is still number one for us, and best we can to make sure people are compliant. If there's victims out there, they're safe, and that these pretrial folks do show up for their court and due process is followed.
Thank you, and I think just to kind of maybe fill in a part of the information, the sheriff had a significant reduction in primarily jailers and his ability to operate the jail, which is his statutory responsibility. And with that came a very difficult decision that he had to make, and consulted certainly with the courts and with the county administration, was to pull the deputies who had been running our day report center and put them back into the jail, so to speak, as jailers or primary function officers. And with that, created then the new umbrella that Susan was asked to take on, and that's developing a model for still a pretrial monitoring program, which the Day Report Center had served us well for 6 years as a law enforcement model. And so we're still in kind of that transition of figuring out what that looks like, how it's going to work, and keeping in mind now it's a civilian-run model instead of a law enforcement-run model. So as I said, that was something we had never contemplated when we hired Susan to take on the job of Justice Services, but certainly now a very significant part of her job and responsibilities in terms of doing what we can with the resources we have, and as the sheriff said, keeping in mind public protection, public safety, as well as accountability. Ms. Ring.
So the staffing issue that you're talking about, is that a workforce? The workforce is not there, or it's a budget issue?
It's a workforce issue.
Workforce issue.
Yeah, we are down a significant number of jail staff for several different reasons. We believe we have one or two of the reasons corrected. So we're starting to build our staff back up. We've got 2 right now in training. We hope to have them on their own here in October. Potentially 5, maybe, starting in October. But we have our training process, so it's not 5 more right on the floor, but I think there's interviews coming up. We have maybe a number of jails, what do we have, 22, right around there for applicants. So we're getting a few more applicants, and I hope by the end of the year we'll be in much better shape than I am right now.
I hope so too. How many people are in the Huber program? Just about approximately, a range?
I think there's 17 or 18 right now on Huber that are out on electronic monitoring right now.
And jail population, Sheriff, is running about?
Jail population was about 87, that's counting those 17. So we're about at 70, which, again, that's kind of when COVID first hit and we pushed out, but we're about at that now. And actually, yeah, as we brought up at the last public protection, I think we were up to about 100 within the last month, month and a half. And now it's the prisons, we've gotten a number that have been sentenced to prison that we were holding that have been transferred, and I think there was 12 of those. So for a number of reasons, we've reduced that population downstairs.
Other questions of the sheriff?
I do have 2 other things I wanted to,
Oh, I'm
if
sorry.
we have
Yes,
a
sure.
moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Supervisor Fiedler had mentioned our elder abuse. I just wanted to go through, I had given a presentation, and I'll surely not give the long presentation, but some of the numbers as we talk about fraud cases with elderly, and that elder abuse, it kind of covered 2 different areas. Both physical abuse things were talked about, but a lot of what was talked about was financial abuse. And not only from those that they know, but really scams that go on. So I had run some numbers, and I just wanted to share these with you about some of the issues in addition to, but could be aggravated by any substance abuse or, those stealing from others to feed their habit as we continue on. But some of the fraud cases I ran from January of 20 through September 1st. This was victims 45 years of age or older. We had a total of 158 victims for scams, frauds, and they were credit card scams, identity thefts, even door-to-door people that came and say, hey, we'll fix your asphalt. A lot of them were scams by phone, IRS scams, law enforcement, them receiving calls of, you have a warrant for your arrest, you need to pay, and we'll take that payment in credit cards, or gift cards, go out and get gift cards and give us the numbers. And it's surprising how many want to comply with that, have been brought up to comply, and so they do it, and then they get scammed. And I know because this goes out, and this is a public meeting, law enforcement will never call on the phone to say send money. IRS will never call on the phone to say send money. Never give out social security numbers. Just, if it doesn't sound right, make some calls, utilize Google to do searching those phone numbers. If someone calls, says they're from law enforcement, get all their information, hang up, Google your local agency, and call and confirm if that's actually who they were talking with. Oftentimes when they get that send money, that's not who they're talking to. It's somebody else. And our ability to recoup those funds that are stolen is very minimal. It is, many of the thieves and the actors are not in this county, not in this state, not in this country, not on this continent. And they're keeping them, and even if we had enough information, if they were local, that'd be one thing. If they're not local, even if we have warrants, we need cooperation from the other end. Another state, possible. Another country, probably not. We are working on one case that involved underage photos being sent to another country through a scam of, give us money or we are going to, once they drew in the photos from the unsuspecting youth, they said, well, we're going to utilize these and send them to all your friends, so send us money. So actually that is one thing that has gotten a little farther than I thought as far as the FBI being involved and having 4 people in another country in custody working on that. So that was something that we don't often see, is people in other countries at least being identified and that country taking action. But again, child crimes, that's a global response. Financial crimes, other countries will not waste their time, we've found out. But of those 158 victims, the total amount lost in that time frame was $792,000 for those in the county. There were 2 elder fraud cases that encompassed about $350,000 of that, and that was family members taking advantage of an elderly relative. But even if you take $350,000 off of that, you still have $400,000+ at 500, 5,000, 10,000 at a crack from all of our victims. So it is a significant problem with technology and phone numbers being sold, credit card numbers being sold on the black web, dark web. I expect it only to get worse. So that also ties up much of our resources, courts, clerk of courts, when we're working through things, trying to get subpoenas, document subpoenas. It's quite a process. So I just wanted to share those numbers with you. And actually we also ran 45 years and younger. I think we had, and I don't have that in front of me, I didn't add that to my slides, but that was $35,000 or $40,000, and there was maybe 50 plus victims on that. And I only talked about that to say, just because we talked about, the elderly fraud, elderly scam, you don't have to be elderly to be scammed or fraud to occur. These folks on these phone calls are that convincing, they're that good. It's what they do for 8 or 10 hours a day, defraud people. They've become quite successful at it. So again, and the other huge thing I should add, on that number, that's only things that the sheriff's office has taken. Hudson PD has taken their own. River Falls has taken their own. New Richmond has taken their own. These are only numbers that my office has taken of those where we are the primary law enforcement for their location. I believe if we added those cities in, and the other municipalities, of which that is where all of the nursing homes are located, much higher population in those areas. I think it's safe to say well into potentially the millions have been scammed in that same time frame out of county residents. So I just wanted to throw that staggering number out to people.
Just one question, Sheriff. Is it safe to say the special needs cells are being utilized?
They are, yes. And they have greatly benefited inmates that are best served having placement there, but it's also helping staff safety as well.
Any questions of the sheriff? Yes,
Mr.
Supervisor
Chairman,
Fiedler.
we've heard a lot of sobering thoughts today from the sheriff and others, but there's a bit of levity that the sheriff might be able to share with us concerning gift cards and our grade school artists and substance abuse calendars. Could you share that story with us, Sheriff?
Thanks. So I shared a story. So I do the calendar contest each year. And because I had mentioned early on of one of the ways folks scam by phone is calling up saying, we need gift cards. Give us gift cards, that's how you pay your warrant, that's how you get your IRS paid. But part of the substance abuse calendar contest, the winners, we take 40 winners and one grand prize winner. So 41 kids get at least a $50 gift card, and the main winner gets a $250 gift card. So on a Saturday morning last fall, as I'm in plain clothes trudging along, I walked in, I said, I need 41 gift cards. Send me to the right rack so I can get $50 gift cards. And by the time I collected all my gift cards, I had one manager and 4 Target employees around me checking on my welfare and if I was being scammed. And I had to produce ID and explain it's for the calendar contest. So I know because it happens frequently that there's Walmart, Target, there are red flags for these employees, and those in the financial institute also talked about their red flags going up when people come in and start taking out money from their account, and they normally don't do that. And the bank starts asking some questions of, what is going on? Why are you doing this? So I had shared that, so thank you.
Any other questions of the sheriff? Mr. Sartorius.
Well, as often in my role, let's go back to the grave details. With regards to, I have a couple questions about the Huber model, the new Huber model. The first question I have is, under this new model, what is the cost to the participant in this model? Has it changed or anything with regards to upfront fees that would be required under this model?
I think the chief deputy trying to get your attention, Sheriff.
She's crunched some of the numbers and worked with Sun Monitoring on some of that billing.
It is $20 a day, and that covers the GPS and alcohol monitoring. I believe under our old Huber, where they would actually stay in custody and go out for work, it was $25. So it is actually $5 cheaper. We're charging actual costs.
And then still the upfront with regards to the fees for them, that are they required with any upfront fees to begin the program under this model?
2 weeks.
2 weeks still?
2 weeks and a hookup charge of $100. So I believe it's,
I think it's $340 total.
yes.
So it's 2 weeks in advance and then the hookup, so.
Perfect. Then one other follow-up question, maybe for the both of you. I'm curious on these, under this monitoring system with the exclusion zones with regards to it. And you mentioned somebody that's on some sort of alcohol monitoring and maybe not going into taverns. My question is, with these exclusion zones, for instance, if this individual is going out in their routine to get groceries, or they stop at a Quick Trip and the local sports pub is right next to this Quick Trip, is that going to flag, and how big are these zones, and what is considered a tavern and things like that? I mean, what is the risk for their participant if they're driving by, or in these kind of establishments, that this is going to be continuously beeping in these kind of monitoring systems with regards to they're in a bad zone?
I think, go ahead, Kathy.
If they're making stops, that's a pre-approved stop, whether it's a grocery store, gas station, doctor's appointment. So it's a pre-approved stop with a specific time. They may have an hour to be at Walmart. So they're being monitored during that time. And if they're going outside of that Walmart property, they're probably getting flagged. So
these zones aren't so big that if it's, and some of these small towns don't may have a Walmart, but a small little grocery store that just happens to have something next door to it that might not be appropriate, is that going to be close enough where they have to be at risk, to have to think, hey, maybe I need to choose someplace else because I might put myself at risk that a deputy might be, coming up on me with regards to this?
I don't think it's going to be that small.
Okay.
Thank you. The next topic is the Casa program, court-appointed special advocates. Judge Waterman is going to introduce our primary presenter, Roy Schoberg. Judge Waterman.
Thank you. We've been talking about Casa for, it seems like years, 2 years, maybe even longer than that. We became interested because we saw our child protection cases increase. These child protection numbers come directly from the state court system. These aren't numbers that the judges maintain in our private files. This comes right out of the state system. 2010, 46 child protection cases, 2020, 82. In 2021, we're on pace to exceed 90. A lot of these cases involve drugs and alcohol. Parents who are addicted. And as I look around this room, I see a lot of parents. And I think you all agree that we as parents would do just about anything within our power to protect the safety and welfare of our children. We make sure that they're fed, we make sure that they're clothed, housed, we make sure that their needs are met. But when we have child protection cases, we have parents who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. The power of that addiction surpasses the love of their own child, to the point where they're going to see that their own addictions are met before their child's needs. As a result, they go unfed, unclothed, and unsupervised. When we have a child protection case, the judge presides, we have a guardian ad litem, we have a prosecutor, we have a social worker, we have the parents, we have the parents' attorneys, we even have the children in the room, possibly some others. And we all discuss what are in the best interests of the child. How can we get the parents to do what they're supposed to do so the best interests of the child are met? And we adults will talk and we'll debate and we'll go through all of the issues. But the one person who doesn't have much of a voice in that process, the one person who doesn't have an advocate is the child, him or herself. And that's where Casa comes in. A court-appointed special advocate to advocate for the child's needs both inside and outside of court. And it was probably a year and a half ago, I was at the YMCA and I'm doing my regular thing, and I see Roy Schoberg there exercising in the morning, and as we all do at the Y, we kind of chit-chat about our days and what's going on. And I mentioned to Roy that we have a meeting coming up about Casa. You might be interested in doing this or participating, or at least getting some information. And thankfully, he attended our meeting and has become the president of the Casa of St. Croix County, Incorporated. And I'll let him take it over from here.
Thank you, Judge. I'm going to try to get this PowerPoint rolling here. Someone. And then there's one more button to switch. Thank you. Yeah, this week I had my microwave go out on me. A couple days later, the toaster went out, and unfortunately, I had my annual update in my boiler for my furnace, and he said, "Come on down here," and he says, "Well, you need a new boiler." So I'm glad that this is working. So it's my privilege to be here, my pleasure to talk to you about Casa program. I think you might have been introduced to it a little bit already, and Judge Nordstrom, I know what you're like as far as a nudge from a judge. So I got that nudge, and I was quite vulnerable in the locker room at that time. So I decided to agree and come and learn more about Casa. Well, Casa is all about volunteers. So the staff shortages that we're experiencing in the jail, the difficulty with budgets, the thing that Casa is, it's a nonprofit organization. Hopefully we'll be able to just be focused in on the mission of serving these kids that are abused, neglected, innocent, all of them, just like the elder abuse situations. These aren't people that have run in foul of the law, these are the victims. And so how can we best address their needs? So Casa is like a big franchise. It's a national network. So we're not the first. And there's about 1,000 different nonprofit organizations across the country now, about 1,000 of them. About 12 of them here in Wisconsin, 12 counties being served. And we're ramping up right now, and I'll end up with a couple slides that talk about the Casa of St. Croix County, Inc. It actually exists. But here's our mission statement. We look out for the kids. And in the introduction that Judge Waterman just gave, lots of people involved in the system of taking care of an abuse situation, but the kid can't really stand up and speak for themselves all the time. And so now we're going to have a volunteer that's assigned to that child, that follows that child around, meets with them face to face. We all know how important that is. I remember the sheriff said he wanted to meet out with the people on Huber once, frequently. So here we would have more face-to-face contacts. That would give the judges so much more. The judges need this. In fact, this is a judge-created program. So Casa is a whole group of volunteers. We hope to have as many people in this room serve as volunteers. But the first volunteer is going to be none other than Yvonne Larson. She's actually, you all know how wonderful she is. And I consider myself to be the weak link on our board of directors. She's on our board of directors, and she's just fabulous, and she's when can I serve? When can I go? So she's keeping this thing pumping forward, and it's just great. So the citizen volunteers who advocate for the best interests of the children, they're appointed by the judges. Legal authority in Wisconsin was offered back in 1999. So this was first constructed 22 years ago. And I said it's a national network, and what that offers is a lot of best practices. So we don't, in our own county here, have to figure out, well, how should we do this? So the national office already has all sorts of ways of informing us, best practices, sample policies. Here's a little bit of what's going on. Of all the children that need to have a service like that, we're only serving about 1 of 7. 1 of 7. So here in St. Croix County, we're serving 0 of 7, of course. But maybe we can serve 6 of 7. That's one of our goals. We can't always serve or expect to serve everybody, but just think if every child here had an advocate that could report to the court. Now, unlike the map that you got in your other literature that was part of the agenda packet, this is showing the number in blue, the number of states that have a program. Barron preceded us, and one of the reasons that we had a little delay is that at first the state Wisconsin Casa organization thought it would be best if we linked up and had a Western Wisconsin organization of several counties. Well, that slowed us down, and so finally we jettisoned that, and now we're back on track to just having our own deal going. Barron's running with the program successfully already. The governs the program, it's going to be the statutes way back to 1999, and then our judges, they're the ones that appoint each of the advocates. Each of the advocates is going to have a professional supervisor that looks over how they're conducting their work. The board of directors, there's 4 of us on the board of directors. We're looking at expanding, but we're the ones that oversee the executive director and all that work. And then, as I mentioned, the national program not only has best practices, but it has standards and policies that they help us implement. So the advocate itself, gather information from the parents. Perhaps they are going to recommend different counseling services for the child, because these children, what hasn't been mentioned, these children have experienced trauma. And that takes more than just another letter to the court. I think this is going to be where we can say, I think this child needs this care with this type of psychology. But they can attend hearings, they can actually even give testimony. Proving a child's outcomes, I mean, this is why I'm here. I'm not here, Judge, to just help you out. It's the kids. It's the kids that maybe they're going to be placed in a more permanent home that much quicker. Maybe they're not going to be in the foster home situation that they're not living well in. So it's a way of getting a report back to the judges sooner that something's not going right or something is going right, and let's move forward. So, and each of these advocates is going to have adversity training, sensitivity training, so no matter what the cultural differences are between the advocates and the child, be it religious or something like that, hopefully we'll be trained to have enough sensitivity to do well. Impact on the foster care system. Well, I was shocked about how treatment court saves a year of prison. My numbers don't come close to that. We might be able to cut back on foster care by 2 months. 2 months of foster care might be about $3,000 to $7,000. I don't know how you add it up, but that's kind of what I've read. And versus our cost, if you include the cost of our executive director and supervisor, ends up being about 1/4 of that. So from the county's point of view, we should be cost effective too. But that's more for people like Ken Witt to worry about. Benefits of Casa to the courts. Well, again, it's created by the judges, increases the information that they have. Wouldn't it be nice to say, well, how's the kid been doing this last couple weeks in school? And the guardian ad litem said, well, I haven't had a chance. And the social worker says, you know, well, I didn't get around to this one either because I have 30 other people I'm worrying about. This advocate only worries about that one child. So what an advantage that report would be. The eyes and ears of the court, stabilizing force in the child's life. Here's the differences between the Casa advocate and the guardian ad litem. So the Casa advocate's going to stay with this child until he gets all the way through the CHIPS program versus the guardian ad litem. Once the particular procedure closes, then they're kind of off the job. So it's a longer term stint, weekly visits versus not so frequent. Well, this is from some judges down there in La Crosse County. Adds humanity. You know, if I was a judge and I was trying to do my best and I didn't have enough input from the child, I would think this job is hard, harder than it needs to be. And to have the benefit of, well, tell me, advocate, what do you think about this? And think how much more beneficial that will be for the judge. And the judges, I think, they know that the child's in the room and the child is suffering at this time, going through a traumatic experience, and anything is going to help, especially someone that really knows that child. Okay, so now St. Croix County has developed its own program. So we were, first of all, linked with Barron County for various reasons. That didn't work out. Then our friend COVID comes along and affects all of us. And then we were led to believe that there was another Casa program in another part of the state that had decided to not continue its program and that we could simply take over their 501(c) status. And so that garden path I was walking down for a while until I learned that they had not done their homework, had not filed certain reports timely. So I said, stop, let's start our own. And so then we just went all full speed ahead and got our own articles filed. With the help of the state office, we got our Form 1023. That's how we're applying for our own 501(c) status. And we just received word from the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions that they've now accepted us as a charitable organization, registered and ready to receive donations. Here's the board of directors. Again, I'm the weak link. Tessa Borley is the head of the Hudson Hospital Foundation. So she knows everybody. And that's great. And then Ryan Shervey, he's involved in this type of work a lot in his profession as an attorney out of New Richmond. And then we all know that Yvonne Larson, and she wants to be our first advocate. So as soon as we get that situation ready to go, she's going to come off the board and she's going to serve as number one. We also have an advisory board, and we're looking for more members of this too, but of course our Judge Waterman, Susan, has been very helpful, and her successor at Restorative Justice is Bridget, and she's been very helpful. And then the state director, Sue Schwartz, has driven in from Green Bay, not on Sundays, but she's driven in from Green Bay to help us along too. Our timeline. So we have received our initial contribution from the state. That was $30,000. We're hoping to receive our deposit from St. Croix County sometime this month. They've set aside some funds for us from some prior years. Now interviewing 5 candidates for executive director. So my job as a president is to kind of oversee the organization, make sure things keep running. The executive director is going to be the champion. So you won't have to listen to me every month or so. Recruit volunteer advocates beginning mid-November 2021. So the executive director gets trained in. We then start to bring in the recruit for our advocates 2021. And we're looking at 25 to 30 right away. And then we're going to commence our Casa program duties, where they're actually going to be out there with the kids as early as January. We aren't just starting. We have our bylaws, conflict of interest, internal financial controls, the memorandum of understanding, executive director job description, 3-year budget all set up, board member job description. So again, very quickly, how can you help? We are looking for some more board members. We have right now 4. Someone with a financial background would be welcomed. So if you want to get in touch with us, either through Judge Waterman or Susan or myself, feel free to give us some names. Then beginning in November, that's our big push. Public awareness campaign will start. We have a public relations firm that the state offers to us. That's part of our in-kind contribution here. Then we're going to support the mission of Casa. We're asking you to help us with that by reaching out to stakeholders and perhaps those who could be offering grants for us and putting in the good word. Have you heard about Casa? And then lastly, individual contributions. So join me in making an individual contribution to the organization too. So we're very excited. We're sorry that it has taken so long, but there's a reason for that long stay. And as I mentioned before, just kind of got off on the wrong track a couple of times. Any questions on Casa? Otherwise, you can't be on the board and be an advocate, but you can be on many other boards. You can be, and there's a few places where you can't be serving and still be an advocate. But we're hoping to get this rolling by January. Judge?
Thank you. And again, between Roy and Yvonne's enthusiasm, I'm not sure there's much room left. So thank you for really taking this on, Roy. I can't thank you enough for spearheading this and getting it off the ground. And I think I shared a statewide conference 2 years ago where about 500 social workers, judges, attorneys attended, and the theme was one caring adult. One caring adult is all a child needs, one caring adult. And this certainly, at least for that period of time kids are out of home, in my mind, goes a long ways in meeting that very simple objective. Other questions of Roy or Judge Waterman? Thank you. Subcommittees, given our time, I can say many of the subcommittees have been kind of in hiatus with the transition from Mr. O'Keefe to Susan, as well as COVID and everything else. We've, I think, not had a lot of subcommittee meetings, but I'll call on those that I've identified to just kind of get an update if there is any, but would encourage them now to kind of reinvigorate themselves and get back to the work at hand. So behavioral health, Bob, did they meet? I know they met. I don't think you had a quorum, is my recollection.
Correct, Judge. We had a meeting on August 23rd scheduled, but a couple of last-minute cancellations prevented us from having a quorum. I would just comment, this is a critical time for us to get together as a behavioral health subcommittee with many opportunities and many activities going on right now. Just quickly, we're applying for dollars that we expect to get to help us strengthen our response to the opioid epidemic and stimulant use, methamphetamine use within the county. So there's a number of initiatives I would very much like to expand upon in the subcommittee, and we will redouble our efforts to get people there.
Thank you. Criminal Justice, Judge Waterman, have you met?
We have met, and the main topic, of course, is justice services and the transition. We don't have another meeting scheduled, but we'll get one on the books soon.
One thing I am going to delegate to that committee is to work with Ms. Caparelli on this whole pretrial development program, what that's going to look like, and hopefully how it can be rolled out. Certainly the involvement and engagement of the courts as an alternative model to what had been our kind of classic law enforcement driven DRC. So I know Susan has some ideas, but I am going to ask that committee to take that on. Judge Vlack's not here, but I don't believe DV committee met, Ms. Caparelli. I think those are all the subcommittees that I had identified. Did I miss anyone? Judge Nordstrand.
I believe we've got a treatment court subcommittee scheduled for next month now. All right.
Thank you, Judge Nordstrand. That completes our formal agenda. Is there any requests for future agenda items? Speaking for myself, I first thank Susan for putting this all together. I think today's meeting was probably one of the more comprehensive meetings we've had in terms of information, projects, ideas, implementation, and as I shared in May, and I know Susan is on board, I think CJCC is at that point of doing as opposed to listening and information gathering, and I know she is one of those people that likes to do things and have outcomes, so I look forward to her leadership of this group. Any announcements or correspondence?
Yeah, Your Honor. Mark Lemke. I have an announcement here. Thanks. Thanks, Your Honor.
I hear a voice.
Yeah. Just to let you know, we had a change that I thought in the department, actually a restructure that came about of this budget. They decided to hire some more supervisors at Rebecca and our level. I thought this transition was going to go a little quicker, so I was going to put in or have this a little more formal, a different CJCC, but as of recent, it sounds like it's going to go a lot, or I thought it was going to be like a November, January. As of recent, it's happening much, much quicker than I anticipated. So in the state's infinite wisdom, they placed another supervisor in St. Croix County, and over the last couple of years, I'd helped grow the county from 9 to 13 agents, which in turn, we got another supervisor with Rebecca in, and then I started absorbing Pierce and Pepin County. As a result of this restructure, they're going to have me break away Pierce and Pepin County and put that new supervisor within St. Croix County. So I will be leaving this county. I'm going to phrase it more of a sabbatical at first, because the way these happen, it could be me transitioning back up here in time, but for this time, I will be leaving St. Croix County. We thought it was going to be, January maybe, and now this could be effective as quickly as mid-October. The way this is going. So with Rebecca there, obviously everything will be, the transition should be pretty smooth. I've been just asked as of this morning to mentor whomever the new hire will be. So I'll be going back and forth and probably in these meetings, moving forward. But eventually my task will be starting to go down to Pierce, and I said now I'll assume Pepin, which would be my 5th county now in a decade. So I've never done Pepin before, but there's one agent. I can't imagine it's going to be too taxing with that going forward. So this is what's happened, and this is, like, again, I wish I would have had this at a different time frame to put this in front of everybody, but it has steamrolled in the past 3 weeks pretty quickly. So with Rebecca and I being there, we'll be able to mentor and assist moving forward with that new position. They're going to take positions, kind of a double-edged sword where I created 9 to 13 and now I'm, I'm moving down the road. But with this being said, we should be able to get that person. Rebecca will lose some of her agents put into that new, and they're going to break up and put down. I think the goal and objective was to lessen the number of agents underneath the supervisors throughout the state. And so it was a budgetary issue that we were really unaware of, but that got passed. And I think there's going to be 30 some odd creations across the state of this position. So you'll see me for a while here, but I'd just like to thank everybody for the collaboration with DOC throughout and working with me. I'll still be, again, roaming around, but I'd just like to thank everybody, and I'll be transitioning down, but I don't think officially the door's closed on me in this county whatsoever, but just wanted to let everybody know. Here it is, so thank you all.
Well, the thanks, Mark, is from us to you for your leadership at DOC, your engagement with this group. You've always been responsive to the courts and our meetings and trying to problem solve. So Pierce and Pepin's gain is our loss, and so we really appreciate what you've done in this county and for the citizens of this county, offenders who you and your agents have supervised, so thank you. Any other announcements or correspondence? Hearing none, our next meeting is November 11. Again, the turnout today was outstanding. I really appreciate everyone's commitment to this group, and again, look forward to your subcommittee meetings between now and November, and we'll see you back here then. Thank you all very much. Adjourned.